How many of you remember this scene from the original Black Flag? None of you do, because it wasn't even there in the first place. As you know, Black Flag Resynced is finally here, and I love it. It just changes everything while keeping it the same. Well, for the most part. But this isn't your typical video talking about how the game was and what it offers, because that's already been done by other creators. Instead, I'll be talking about some of the major and interesting changes that most people didn't pay attention to. Some of these are the kind of changes that will leave you wondering whether they existed in the OG game or not, unless you're an AC veteran. And as expected, there will be a few major spoilers in this video, so watch at your own risk. Most of you probably wouldn't have even paid attention to this unless you had seen a comparison or actually replayed the original game just before the remake. Once you get the jackdaw, upgrade your holster, and finally reach NASA, you will notice three different things. The first one is a bit minor, but it's actually related to the camera angle. You will see that the camera pans a little differently this time when it focuses on Edward and Adewale. Then right after that, you will see both Edward and Adewale walking together towards the tavern and having a small piece of dialogue. It's nothing major, as you can hear for yourself, but it does tell us some minor things like how Adewale already knew about the pirates. It basically adds more depth to their relationship. You will also see Anne Bonny standing there welcoming Edward this time around, and this is a bit more noticeable because we don't actually see Anne Bonny until sequence 5 or 6 in the original game. It always bothered me as I always thought where she was during this time, and I assumed that she had simply joined them later on. But this time you can see her bringing the drinks to Edward and the pirates. Her animations are exactly up to the mark, but the concept itself is great. Right after that, you meet James' kid, where Anne is the one who tells you about the pirates this time around and convinces you to free them. None of this was present in the original game. There, we simply went to the tavern to a separate mission icon, the cutscene would start, and there was no Anne Bonny or conversation between the two. Instead, we just had to finish the cutscene and find the crew to fill our ship. That's it. I think it adds a lot of missing context, which I really like, but I don't like how it was executed. As I showed you at the very beginning, the entire Duncan Walpole vs Edward Kenway fight has been completely changed. For comparison, when Edward chases down Duncan through the forest, the pathway is much cleaner and you get shot as well. That part exists in the original too, but the layout is completely different and shorter here. Even if we ignore that, there's now a small mocap cutscene of Duncan jumping onto Edward, resulting in his hidden blade getting damaged, which finally explains why his blade was damaged in the first place, even though it was working perfectly when he jumped onto the ship. Later, instead of it being a simple counter kill, there's now a complete boss fight where we get to learn the basics of the game while also getting a pretty reasonable explanation of how a pirate managed to kill a master assassin. If you ask me personally, I really like this change because if you've been watching our videos, then you already know I've been complaining about this stuff for God knows how long. Now we actually have a pretty solid argument for how Edward managed to kill Duncan, since Duncan was limping throughout the entire fight, which wasn't the case in the original. So I consider this a big win. But you know what the biggest change for me is? Not paying a full price for a newly released game. Black Flag Resynced is still a premium release, with the standard edition originally priced at $59 and the deluxe edition at $69. But with a loot bar, you can grab these Xbox Series X and S game keys at a better value. The process is actually very simple. You have to link your Xbox account to a loot bar, purchase your key, and it gets activated automatically. You can then verify the activation to make sure everything went through successfully. Loot bar also provides official distribution game keys with instant delivery or a 100% activation guarantee, along with the 7-day after-sale support and a refund guarantee too. Plus, with a 4.9 rating on Trustpilot from tens of thousands of reviews, Loot Bar has built a reputation as a safe and reliable service for gamers. So if you're looking for the most affordable game key for Assassin's Creed Black Flag Resynced or the Echoes of Incard, check out the links in the description and the pinned comment. So in the end, if you're looking for the most affordable game key, better call Loot Bar. This one can be considered a spoiler, so bug off, mate. But if you're still here, then listen. The game doesn't include all of the original outfits. We still have Atreus and Altair's outfits missing, along with the Explorer outfit, which is surprising considering it was featured in the promotional videos we saw a few months ago. But to compensate for that, I think we've gotten some pretty cool new outfits as well. Aside from the usual Helix Store packs, which don't fit the game at all, we now have several outfits for Edward that give us a pretty good idea of what could have been if we had gotten to see him grow more as an assassin instead of the atrocity that writers committed by killing him off in such a disappointing way. We've got the Master Assassin outfit, the Shadow and the Shade outfit, and if it counts, the original Duncan Walpole robes. All of these outfits were previously seen during the concept stages, and when I glanced at them for the first time, I knew they were going to be peak. I know this isn't a major change by any means, but it's still better than some of the outfits we've been getting in the recent Assassin's Creed games, because most of the time they're just reskins while the premium ones are locked behind real money. And I absolutely love the Master Assassin outfit. I mean, it gives me those Ezio vibes from Revelations. I think you agree too. This is by far the saddest thing I'm mentioning here because I genuinely wasn't expecting this, at least not for the main story. I mean, they did use mocapped cutscenes in the game and they look beautiful. Almost all the main story cutscenes have been mocapped, or I should say taken directly from the original game. But do you know what the catch is? The game also features some of those lifeless cutscenes from the RPG games within the main story. For example, the Anbani cutscene I mentioned earlier feels robotic and mocapped at the same time because both styles have been seamlessly integrated together. And the one right after that feels stiff as well. To be very precise, if you have a keen eye, you can easily tell which scenes are mocapped and which ones aren't. Sadly, almost all of the side content aside from a few quests features this cutscene quality throughout, which is a major change that I wasn't expecting. At least not for the main story. That being said, they're still miles better than some of the recent cutscenes we've seen in the same engine. So I'll count that as a win. This one's pretty surprising because I initially thought of it as a bug, and honestly, I still hope it is. Almost all the viewpoints in the game seem to use the same synchronization music, which wasn't the case in the original. The same music you hear on islands like Cape Bonavista is the music you will hear when synchronizing a viewpoint in Havana or even Nassau. Now, it's a minor change, so I'm not gonna say it's the end of the world, but you know what keeping it like the original would have added? Atmosphere. Each piece of music reminded us that we were in a different part of the Caribbean, and that's what helped differentiate Havana from Kingston, Kingston from Nassau, and so on. Removing that makes the game feel a bit more linear in terms of its world building, and that's honestly a shame. Thankfully, this is something they can easily add back in a future update, and even if they don't, we have modders to do the job for us, considering they're already fixing a lot of the game's issues, like the cutscene frame rate. So while it's not a major problem, it's definitely one of those small details that added a lot more than most people realized. Oh, and did I mention the cutscene frame rate? Yup, that's an issue once again. Starting with Shadows, this is beginning to look like a recurring theme. In Shadows, almost every main story cutscene was locked to 30 FPS for unknown reasons. At first, I thought maybe they were trying to make the game feel more cinematic, but then around 5 or 6 months later after launch, they added an option to uncap them, although only on PC. There were also tons of other issues with the game that Ubisoft Quebec eventually updated and improved, making the overall experience much better in the end. I don't know if this was a limitation of the new Ubisoft Anvil pipeline engine, but it's incredibly distracting. And as expected, since this game uses the same engine as AC Shadows, the same limitation persists. That means PC players once again have to rely on mods to fix it, while for console users it remains a major issue, which is honestly odd because in all the preview footage the cutscenes were running at a noticeably higher frame rate than what we have now. And that's what makes me very disappointed. This feels like something that should have been there on day one. I don't think anyone covered this in detail during the preview period, but after playing the game myself, I found that the collectible system is quite different from the original. In the original, we had access to a lot of collectibles right from the beginning, including chests, secrets, and even treasure maps. Now things work a little differently. Some collectibles are locked behind story progression, and you only gain access to them once you've actually learned about them through the narrative. For example, the Mayan stones only become available in Sequence 4 after we kill Dukas. Once that happens, they start appearing on the map. In the original game, however, you could collect them at any time and at almost any point in the story. Now they show up as undiscovered until the story introduces them, which actually encourages players to revisit areas they've already explored. As a result, the world feels a lot more replayable because you have a reason to return to previous locations. In the original, most areas could be fully completed the very first time you visited them. And I think this fixes a lot of inconsistencies, because I'm actually surprised they let it slide in the original game. Now, these collectibles have a proper narrative connection, which makes the whole system feel much more natural. This is one of the things I hate in Assassin's Creed games that has sadly returned, and that's the Fog of War. If you don't remember it, it's basically the mechanic where you have to manually uncover the map by running through every corner of it, and for completionists like me, that's a huge pain in the ass. I mean, it isn't mandatory or anything, but it just feels weird when parts of the map are still covered in fog. It gives me that unfinished feeling, like no matter how much I've done, there's always a part of my brain telling me, man, I'm not doing enough. And surprisingly, this was the exact same issue Assassin's Creed Shadows had at launch. I still remember running along the boundaries of every region and then circling back in and out like a madman just to uncover the remaining bits of the map. Thankfully, Ubisoft removed it later on. And that makes me hopeful that something similar will happen with Resynced, along with the 30 FPS cutscenes we talked about earlier. But once again, my question is, why not at launch? If you can fix it later, why not get it right from the beginning? Is it really that hard to maintain consistency? And I think these were all of the major changes in the remake. I know there are a lot more, but almost all of them have already been covered by us and other creators before. So what do you think about the remake so far? I won't be publishing a review anytime soon since I haven't played it early like some of the other creators, but sometime later in the future, you will definitely get one in true Faxx style. But until then, make sure to subscribe and I'll see you in the next one. Till then, take care and goodbye.